The camera opens with a sleek, high-end luxury boutique. Shelves are lined with designer goods, and soft jazz plays in the background. Jonathan Cade, dressed in an impeccable suit, calmly arranges a display. His movements are precise, almost too deliberate, as though masking something deeper. A bell chimes as a customer enters, and Jonathan greets them warmly, exuding professionalism. The scene transitions to closing time. Jonathan locks the doors, and the peaceful evening settles in. Cut to a shadowy alley. A group of rough-looking men, the Iron Fangs, huddle together, laughing as they plan something sinister. Their leader, Vince, spits out Jonathan's name with venom, mocking his success and wealth. Back at the boutique, Jonathan watches security footage on his phone. His expression darkens as he sees graffiti on his pristine walls, racist slurs, and symbols. A long pause. He exhales slowly, almost too calm, his fingers tracing a scar on his wrist. The screen fades to black as Jonathan's voice echoes, "They think they know me, but they have no idea who they've crossed." Before the video ends, a smooth transition to Jonathan standing in his store. He looks directly at the camera. If you're ready to see how this plays out, make sure to subscribe and follow. You don't want to miss what's coming next. The scene opens with Jonathan in a dimly lit room, sitting at an old desk. The air is heavy with silence, broken only by the sound of him loading a small flash drive into his laptop. On the screen, he reviews the gang's faces from the security footage. His expression remains unreadable, but his hands are steady as they click through files and maps. The camera cuts to a hidden compartment beneath the floor of his home. Jonathan pulls out a sleek, black case. As he opens it, the contents are revealed, an array of weapons, tools, and documents that speak of a past life long buried. He picks up a worn dagger, its blade engraved with intricate designs, and holds it for a moment before putting it back. Night falls, and Jonathan moves through the city, his silhouette blending seamlessly with the shadows. He visits old contacts, men and women who react with a mix of awe and fear when they see him. One of them, a tech-savvy informant, hands him a USB drive. "They're holed up in the old steel mill," the informant says nervously. "But you didn't hear it from me." Jonathan nods silently and disappears into the night. Cut to the steel mill. The Iron Fangs are laughing and celebrating, unaware of the silent figure observing them from the rafters above. Jonathan's movements are methodical as he disables their security systems, cutting power to certain areas and isolating members of the gang one by one. He confronts a smaller group of the gang, using hand-to-hand combat to take them down. His strikes are precise and brutal, but he leaves them alive, a clear message that this is just the beginning. Back at their hideout, Vince discovers the incapacitated members of his gang, tied up with a simple message carved into a piece of wood: "The ghost is watching." Vince's face twists with confusion and anger as he shouts to his men, "Find out who's behind this. Now!" Jonathan watches from a distance, his face illuminated by the faint glow of a streetlight. His voice, barely above a whisper, carries weight. "You'll wish you never walked into my life." The screen cuts to black. The scene opens with Vince pacing in the gang's hideout, barking orders at his men. They're armed now, paranoid, searching every shadow. The once loud confidence of the Iron Fangs has faded, replaced by tension and fear. Outside the steel mill, Jonathan watches from the darkness. He's dressed in all black, a hood covering most of his face. Slowly, methodically, he begins his assault. The first group of guards is taken out silently. Jonathan uses the environment to his advantage: chains, pipes, and even the shadows themselves. Each takedown is calculated, leaving no trace except the incapacitated bodies of his enemies. Vince's second-in-command, a wiry, ruthless man named Deke, stumbles upon one of the knocked-out guards. Panic sets in, and he calls out to Vince over a walkie-talkie. He's here. Whoever he is, he's in the building. Vince growls in frustration, grabbing a bat wrapped in barbed wire. Let him come. He's just one man. Jonathan moves deeper into the mill, disabling more gang members as he goes. Each encounter reveals a little more of his lethal skill, quick, efficient, and unrelenting. He leaves another message for Vince, this time scrawled on a wall in red paint, "Your sins catch up to you tonight." As the gang grows more desperate, they set a trap, funneling Jonathan into a confined space. For a moment, it seems like they have the upper hand. Jonathan steps into the room, surrounded by armed men, their weapons aimed directly at him. Vince emerges from the shadows, a smirk on his face. "You should have stayed in your little boutique, old man. Now, you're mine." Jonathan removes his hood, revealing his face. His calm demeanor unnerves the gang, some of whom visibly hesitate. Vince laughs nervously, trying to regain control. "You don't look so scary to me," Vince taunts. Jonathan's voice is cold, deliberate. "You don't need to look scary to be feared." What follows is an explosive fight sequence. Jonathan moves with unmatched precision, disarming and disabling the gang members despite their numbers. The confined space works to his advantage, forcing them into chaos as he systematically takes them down. Finally, it's just Jonathan and Vince. The two face off, Vince swinging his bat wildly while Jonathan dodges effortlessly. Vince grows increasingly frustrated and reckless, leaving himself open. Jonathan capitalizes, delivering a devastating series of strikes that leaves Vince on the ground, bloodied and broken. Jonathan stands over him, his eyes cold. "This is mercy," he says quietly, before walking away. As the police arrive, summoned by an anonymous tip, Jonathan disappears into the night, leaving the gang dismantled and their leader defeated. The final scene shows Jonathan back in his boutique, calmly arranging a display as if nothing happened. The scars on his hands tell a different story, but his expression is one of quiet satisfaction. The scene opens with Vince sitting in a hospital bed, heavily bandaged and restrained. The once cocky leader of the Iron Fangs is now a broken man. Two detectives interrogate him, but Vince is distant, his eyes darting nervously to the corners of the room as if expecting someone, or something, to appear. "He's not human," Vince mutters under his breath, barely audible. "You don't understand, he's a ghost." The detectives exchange skeptical glances, one of them leaning closer. "Who's he?" "Give us a name, Vince." Vince swallows hard but says nothing, his terror leaving him paralyzed. Elsewhere, Jonathan stands on the balcony of his home, overlooking the city at dawn. The light reflects off the buildings, but his face is somber. His assistant, Maya, joins him, handing him a cup of coffee. "It's over," she says softly. "You did what needed to be done." Jonathan doesn't respond immediately. He takes a sip of the coffee, his gaze still fixed on the horizon. "They'll come back," he finally says. "Different faces, same hate. It never really ends." Maya places a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fight again. In our way. You've already shown this city that they can't break us." Later that day, the boutique reopens, bustling with supportive customers. Word of Jonathan's quiet heroism has spread, though no one truly knows the extent of his actions. People from the community bring flowers and notes of encouragement, filling the store with warmth and life. A young man enters the shop hesitantly, his face bruised and his demeanor nervous. Jonathan approaches him, his expression unreadable. I used to run with them," the young man stammers, avoiding eye contact. "I didn't do anything that night, I swear, but I didn't stop them either." Jonathan studies him for a long moment before speaking. "And now?" "I want out," the young man says earnestly. "I don't want to be like them. I want to do better." Jonathan nods slowly, gesturing for the young man to follow him. He hands him a broom. "Start here," Jonathan says simply. "Work hard. Respect everyone who walks through that door. That's how you begin again." The young man looks at him in disbelief, but quickly takes the broom, nodding gratefully. As the day winds down, Jonathan locks up the boutique and steps outside. The night is quiet, but there's a subtle shift in the air, a sense of peace, however temporary. A car idles across the street, its headlights off. Inside, a shadowy figure watches Jonathan closely. The camera lingers on Jonathan's face as he looks in the car's direction, his expression calm but knowing. The car drives off, leaving Jonathan alone in the street. He turns and walks away, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness. The screen fades to black. The scene begins with Jonathan in his quiet home, sitting at a table surrounded by scattered photographs and documents. They're remnants of his past, faces of people he once worked with, missions he'd rather forget, and places he can never return to. His fingers hover over a photograph of himself from years ago, younger and with the same cold determination in his eyes. Maya enters the room cautiously, sensing the weight of the moment. "You're not thinking about going back to that life, are you?" she asks, her tone filled with concern. Jonathan shakes his head, a faint smile crossing his lips. "No. That man's gone." But his shadow, he pauses, looking out the window into the city beyond. The shadow always lingers. The camera shifts to the street outside his boutique the next morning. The shop is alive with customers again, the community rallying around Jonathan. The young man Jonathan gave a chance to is hard at work, greeting customers with enthusiasm. Jonathan watches from a distance, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. As the day winds down, a package is delivered to the boutique. Jonathan opens it in private, revealing an ornate envelope with no sender. Inside is a single card with an ominous message: "You can't outrun the past forever." Jonathan's jaw tightens, and for a moment, the calm exterior cracks. He places the card down, his mind already calculating. The scene transitions to Jonathan on the rooftop of a nearby building, looking out over the city at night. His voice narrates, "This city has its demons. Some are in plain sight. Others hide in the shadows. I've been both, and I know how to face them." He turns to face the camera, his expression resolute. "If you've been here this far, you know the fight isn't over. Subscribe, follow, and stay with me. Trust me, things are just getting started." The screen fades to black as the sound of distant footsteps echoes, followed by a single, faint whisper: "The ghost returns."